The moment my husband lifted his glass and smiled, I felt the ground tilt beneath my feet and knew something terrible was coming. At our daughter's graduation, in front of everyone we loved, he chose betrayal over decency and power over family. When he said he was leaving me, humiliation burned hotter than rage, because this was not private pain anymore. This was public destruction, and he enjoyed the control of it. If you're enjoying this, please subscribe and share. Your support keeps the stories coming. For a second, no one moved. The music kept playing, soft and cheerful, completely wrong for the words that had just been dropped like a bomb in the middle of the room. My name hung in the air without being spoken. Gregory did not say it. He did not look at me. He looked at our guests, at his coworkers, at people whose opinions he valued far more than the woman who had built a life beside him for nearly 3 decades. He cleared his throat and continued talking, as if this were a planned announcement instead of an emotional execution. He said he wanted honesty. He said he wanted freedom. He said life was too short to stay where happiness had ended. Each sentence landed like another blade, sharp and deliberate. I stayed seated. My hands were folded in my lap, nails digging into my skin hard enough to hurt. Pain helped me focus. Around us, our daughter Amelia's graduation banners drooped slightly from the wall, blue and silver letters spelling out a future she had worked relentlessly to earn. The irony made me dizzy. People began to turn toward me, slowly, cautiously, the way you look at wreckage after an accident. They waited for tears. They waited for a breakdown. Gregory had always told people I was emotional, fragile, dependent. He had shaped that image carefully over the years, quietly mocking my caution, my spreadsheets, my habit of saving receipts and documents. He liked to joke that I planned for disasters that would never come. I wondered if he remembered those jokes now. Amelia stood up so abruptly that her chair screeched against the floor. The sound cut through the room like glass breaking. My daughter, still wearing her graduation gown, stepped forward before I could even speak. Her face was pale, but her eyes were steady. I had never been prouder of her than in that moment. "You do not get to do this today," she said, her voice loud enough for everyone to hear. "You do not get to hijack my graduation for your selfish announcement." Gregory laughed, a short, dismissive sound meant to reassert control. He told her they would discuss it later. He told her adults were talking. Amelia did not step back. She did not lower her voice. She turned toward the crowd instead. "While I worked 2 jobs to help pay for school," she said, "while my mother skipped vacations and sold her jewelry, he was draining our family accounts. He told us it was for investments. It was not. It was for his exit." The silence this time was different. It was heavy, accusatory. People stopped pretending not to listen. Phones came out. Someone whispered my name. Gregory's face tightened. He told Amelia she was confused. He told her she did not understand how finances worked. That was when Cassandra spoke. "I did not know he would announce it like this," she said softly, stepping into view near the windows. Her voice shook, not with guilt, but with surprise. "I thought he was going to talk to you privately." That was the moment something inside me went completely still. I stood up slowly. The room seemed to shrink around me. Every eye locked onto my face. For years, I had been underestimated because I was quiet, because I listened more than I spoke, because I did not need to dominate a room to feel secure. Gregory had mistaken silence for ignorance. He had mistaken patience for weakness. "You should leave," I said calmly. Gregory frowned, confused, as if this outcome had never crossed his mind. Cassandra looked embarrassed, suddenly aware she was standing in the wrong place at the wrong time. "This is not appropriate," Gregory warned. "This is over," I replied. "You made it public, now you can leave publicly too." They did not argue for long. The mood had shifted. The power was no longer where Gregory expected it to be. As they walked out, conversations erupted in hushed bursts. Amelia came back to my side, her hands slipping into mine like she had when she was small. That night, after the guests left and the house fell quiet, Amelia asked me what would happen next. I told her the truth. I told her I had been preparing for this moment longer than anyone realized. Gregory never noticed the separate savings account in my name. He never noticed the copies of financial statements stored away year after year. He never reread the prenuptial agreement he had laughed about signing, convinced it was meaningless. He thought control meant invisibility. 2 days later, we stood in court. Gregory arrived with a nervous young lawyer. I arrived with someone who already knew the ending. When the judge asked about finances, documents were laid out with precision: transfers, withdrawals, dates, patterns. Gregory shouted. The judge told him to sit down. Accounts were frozen. The agreement was upheld. I was granted temporary possession of the house due to infidelity and financial misconduct. Outside the courthouse, Gregory finally lost control. He yelled my name. He demanded answers. He wanted to know when I had changed. I looked at him and realized he still did not understand anything at all. Because what he did not know, what he had never bothered to ask, was that this was only the beginning, and the next step would strip him of everything he thought he was about to gain. Gregory thought the court decision was the worst thing that could happen to him, and that mistake became my quiet advantage. He walked away from the courthouse furious and humiliated, convinced the damage was temporary. I walked away calm, knowing the real reckoning had not even started yet. Power does not announce itself loudly. It waits until the timing is perfect. The days after the hearing moved strangely fast and unbearably slow at the same time. Word spread through our social circle with the efficiency of gossip disguised as concern. People called to ask how I was holding up. Some asked because they cared. Others asked because they wanted details. I gave none. Silence had always been my shield, and now it became my strategy. Gregory tried to regain control immediately. He sent messages accusing me of turning Amelia against him. He complained about the frozen accounts. He warned me that I was overestimating my position. Each message revealed more panic than power. He still believed money was leverage, not evidence. Cassandra did not last long. She called me once late at night, her voice tense and defensive. She said she never meant to hurt anyone. She said Gregory had told her we were practically divorced already. She said she had not known about the finances. I listened without interrupting. Then I asked one question. Did he tell you his business was already failing? There was a long pause. She did not answer. She did not need to. 2 weeks later, Amelia told me Cassandra had moved out of Gregory's apartment. The future he had promised her vanished the moment the money stopped flowing. Gregory's anger grew louder as his options shrank. He showed up at the house unannounced one afternoon, demanding access to documents he claimed were his. I stood in the doorway and reminded him calmly that the court order prohibited him from entering. He laughed bitterly and told me I was enjoying this too much. He was wrong. I was not enjoying it. I was focused. For years, I had watched women around me lose everything in divorces because they trusted promises instead of paperwork. I had learned quietly. I had taken courses online under the excuse of professional development. I had built skills while Gregory built arrogance. What he thought was passivity was preparation. Amelia returned to campus, but she called me every night. She told me how proud she was. She told me she finally understood why I had always insisted on knowing where every dollar went. Her words healed something deep in me that I had not realized was wounded. The next court date approached, and Gregory's behavior grew more erratic. He fired his lawyer. He hired another. He tried to delay proceedings. None of it worked. The evidence did not change just because his confidence did. When the preliminary ruling confirmed enforcement of the prenuptial agreement, Gregory exploded in the hallway. He accused me of ruining his life. He accused me of planning revenge for years. I did not correct him. Behind the scenes, I was rebuilding. I reviewed my independent savings and realized I had more freedom than I had ever allowed myself to acknowledge. I began drafting a business plan at my kitchen table late at night. Consulting, financial transitions, helping women understand what I had learned the hard way. The idea scared me. That meant it mattered. Gregory heard about it through mutual acquaintances and mocked it openly. He told people I was desperate. He said I was pretending to be capable. He said no one would take me seriously. I remembered every time he had said similar things across our marriage. I remembered how often I had believed him. The turning point came unexpectedly during a casual lunch with a former colleague who had quietly followed my work for years. She asked for advice. Then she asked if I would consider doing it professionally. Then she referred someone else. Momentum does not announce itself either. It accumulates. Gregory's business continued to unravel, accounts flagged, credit restricted, plans postponed. He tried to blame me publicly. Privately, he begged for flexibility. He offered reconciliation without apology. He asked if we could negotiate. I declined. The final divorce hearing was scheduled. The date landed like a cruel joke, our 29th anniversary. Gregory looked at me across the courtroom that day with something close to fear. He knew now that I was not the woman he thought he had left behind at a graduation party. He knew something irreversible had shifted. As the judge prepared to speak, I felt steady, ready, unafraid. Because no matter what happened next, I already knew one thing for certain. Gregory was about to lose far more than he ever imagined, and this time there would be no audience to distract him from the truth. The courtroom smelled of polished wood, paper, and tension, every seat filled with people waiting for a verdict that had been years in the making. Gregory sat across from me, his face pale, eyes darting like a cornered animal. He fidgeted with his papers, as if rearranging them could rewrite the past, undo the years of betrayal, or erase the humiliations he had endured publicly. I, on the other hand, sat perfectly still, hands folded, letting the quiet strength I had cultivated over decades radiate like armor. If you're enjoying this, please subscribe and share. Your support keeps the stories coming. The judge spoke slowly, deliberately, weighing every word. She outlined the history of financial mismanagement, the infidelity, the broken trust. Each point was precise, backed by evidence I had collected in silence, documents no one could dispute. Gregory's mouth opened to argue, then closed. His confidence had evaporated entirely, leaving only desperation and disbelief. I remembered the first time I realized he was not the man I had married. It had been a small moment. He laughed when a bill arrived, dismissing responsibility, assuming I would quietly pay it. I smiled then, pretending ignorance, because I knew patience was my weapon. Years later, that patience had become armor, strategy, and revelation all at once. When the judge announced that the prenuptial agreement would be enforced in full, the room seemed to shift. The weight of every insult, every mockery, every time he underestimated me landed squarely on him. He was left with almost nothing, a failing business, empty accounts, a reputation crumbling faster than he could repair it. I retained the house, financial security, and the dignity he thought he could destroy. Outside the courthouse, reporters asked questions, but I answered only a few, carefully, each word measured. Amelia waited nearby, radiant in her graduation gown, still clutching her diploma. She did not need to speak. The pride in her eyes said everything. I had not just protected our lives. I had preserved her trust, her future, and my own identity. Returning home, I walked through rooms once filled with his control. Everything that felt heavy with compromise now felt expansive with possibility. I reviewed my plans for the consultancy, mapping out how to help women navigate transitions I had lived through, the financial, emotional, and practical realities of divorce and self-reclamation. Each idea was solid, each step deliberate, each one a reclamation of power I had been denied for too long. Gregory's absence became noticeable in every corner. Where he once dictated the flow of the house, now I moved freely, making decisions that reflected my own goals rather than his desires. I signed the first contracts for my consultancy, hired a small team of advisors, and began speaking publicly on platforms that had once dismissed my voice. The work was difficult, demanding, and exhilarating. Every success was a quiet revenge, every accomplishment a testament to preparation, not luck. Months passed. Amelia thrived at college, visiting on weekends with stories of success, friendship, and growth. She noticed the difference in me, not a woman scarred by betrayal, but one strengthened, strategic, and alive with purpose. Friends and acquaintances remarked on the transformation. Where Gregory had once projected power, now I embodied it, steady, unshakable, and visible. Then came the moment I had been waiting for, unplanned but inevitable, a business opportunity that required a large initial investment. The consultancy had grown quietly, fueled by word of mouth, reputation, and careful planning. Gregory learned about it through mutual contacts. His reaction was predictable, a mix of envy, frustration, and disbelief. He still believed he could intimidate, but the power had shifted permanently. I never looked back. Every legal hurdle he tried to use, every public attempt to shame or manipulate failed. Each misstep on his part reinforced the lessons I had already internalized. Preparation, clarity, and patience always outlast arrogance, secrecy, and betrayal. By the end of the year, my consultancy was thriving. I spoke at conferences, I advised women across the country. I built something lasting from what had been intended to destroy me. And yet, even with this triumph, the final confrontation lingered in my mind. The moment when the man who had humiliated me in front of everyone would finally see that his schemes were irrelevant, his arrogance meaningless. I had taken everything he underestimated, the quiet strength, the meticulous planning, the resilience, and used it to build a future far richer than the one he had stolen from us. One evening, as I closed the office door and looked around at the results of years of hidden effort, I realized that the real victory was not the money, the house, or even the consultancy. It was the reclamation of my identity. The betrayal that had seemed like the end had become the beginning of everything I was capable of. And somewhere in the distance, Gregory was left counting losses he could not recover, unaware that the woman he had tried to break had become unstoppable. The morning after the final court ruling, the house felt like a sanctuary rather than a battlefield. Every room, once heavy with tension, now echoed with quiet possibility. Amelia had left for campus early, but her words from the night before lingered. She believed in me, in everything I could accomplish, and in the strength I had hidden for so long. For the first time in years, I did not feel like I was running from someone else's shadow. If you're enjoying this, please subscribe and share. Your support keeps the stories coming. I began mapping the next steps for my consultancy with a precision I had honed during years of silent preparation. Financial transitions, career changes, self-sufficiency, these were not abstract ideas. They were lifelines I had built in the dark, learning from mistakes, observing failures, and quietly absorbing lessons that Gregory never thought to notice. Each page I wrote in my plan was a reclamation of autonomy. Each calculation was proof that I had not just survived, but learned to thrive. The first client walked into my makeshift office, a modest space converted from the sunroom. She was timid, uncertain, weighed down by a divorce in which she had lost everything. I could see the reflection of my past in her eyes, fear, doubt, quiet desperation. I smiled, offering the one thing I had discovered could not be taken away: clarity. I guided her step by step, showing her how to reclaim finances, redefine goals, and rebuild confidence. By the end of the session, her posture was taller, her expression lighter. Watching her leave, I realized I was teaching more than financial literacy. I was teaching resilience. Meanwhile, Gregory's presence became a whisper in our lives rather than a storm. He tried to interfere, sending calls, emails, and even legal threats, but his timing was sloppy, his arguments weak. Each attempt only confirmed the irreversible shift in power. He had underestimated me. He had assumed silence equaled weakness, that patience was submission. He was wrong on every count. Amelia's birthday approached, and he did not attend. Invitations he had expected to manipulate became empty gestures. He had lost his influence completely. I started hosting workshops, speaking to small groups, sharing stories without shame or dramatization. I explained the mistakes I had seen, the pitfalls of trusting arrogance over documentation, the importance of self-reliance. Women listened with rapt attention. They asked questions, sought guidance, and left transformed. Each interaction felt like a step further away from betrayal and closer to purpose. I realized that my true victory was not punitive, it was transformative. What had been intended to break me had become the foundation of something extraordinary. Then came a moment I had not anticipated. A former business associate of Gregory's contacted me discreetly, revealing that his ventures were collapsing faster than he had admitted publicly. Investors were pulling out. Assets were frozen. The carefully curated image he had presented for years was crumbling under scrutiny. Cassandra had moved on. The people who had once reinforced his confidence were no longer listening. It was poetic in its finality. The house he had wanted to dominate, the fortune he had tried to claim, the social standing he had relied on, all slipping beyond his grasp while I quietly built a life grounded in real achievement. Amelia called one evening, excited about her own small successes at college. She talked about projects, friends, and the realization that independence was its own kind of strength. I listened, proud, and I understood fully that what I had modeled for her, courage, patience, planning, and resilience, would shape her future just as much as my own. The years of being underestimated, mocked, and dismissed had become a roadmap for empowerment, and she was already walking it. The first major client signed a substantial contract, enough to make the consultancy viable beyond the small, cautious beginnings. I felt a surge of satisfaction, not just in the financial sense, but in the quiet validation of preparation, of silent effort that had gone unnoticed by Gregory for years. I had built something tangible, independent, and resilient. The irony was delicious. The man who had intended to ruin me had inadvertently strengthened me, forcing focus, strategy, and innovation where complacency had once reigned. One late evening, sitting at my desk with the city lights flickering outside the window, I reflected on the transformation. Betrayal had been the catalyst, humiliation had been the spark, and resilience had been the fuel. Everything that had seemed like loss had been recast into opportunity. The house, the consultancy, the independence, and most importantly, the reclaimed identity, all of it stood as a testament to quiet strength. Yet, even as I celebrated, I could not ignore the lingering question. Gregory had been cornered, his arrogance shattered, his plans in ruin, but he was still out there, unpredictable and dangerous in his desperation. Every call, every whispered report, every misstep could still carry consequences if he attempted to strike again. I had rebuilt, but vigilance was now part of the life I had forged. The final confrontation had not yet fully arrived, and that knowledge kept my senses sharp, my strategy precise, and my determination unwavering. The night ended quietly, but the air carried tension. A shadow of the past lingered, a reminder that while the war had been won, the campaign was not yet over. And in that quiet, as I prepared for the next day of my life, I realized that true empowerment was not static, it was ongoing, demanding courage, foresight, and an unbreakable will. The morning of the final confrontation arrived like a storm that had been building for years. Gregory had exhausted every avenue he thought might give him leverage: lawyers, threats, attempts to manipulate witnesses, and yet here he was, powerless, facing the consequences he had so carefully ignored. I stood in the living room reviewing documents one last time, feeling a strange calmness settle over me. This was not anxiety. This was quiet certainty, the kind only preparation, resilience, and experience can bring. If you're enjoying this, please subscribe and share. Your support keeps the stories coming. The courtroom was tense, every seat filled with people who had witnessed fragments of our lives over decades. Some were curious, some were judgmental, some were there simply to observe the spectacle they had expected to unfold years ago. None of them knew what had truly been at work behind closed doors. None of them understood that I had not merely survived, I had been building a life, quietly, strategically, methodically, while Gregory assumed ignorance would protect him. He looked at me across the room, his expression a mix of fear and disbelief. The arrogance that had defined him for decades was gone. There was no smile, no dismissive shrug, no confident posture, only realization, slow, sinking, and inevitable, that every move he had made had underestimated me, and that miscalculation would be his undoing. The judge called the hearing to order. Documents were presented, contracts reviewed, evidence meticulously laid out. Every instance of financial misconduct, every act of infidelity, every breach of trust, cataloged, verified, undeniable. Gregory's attempts to intervene were shouted over, dismissed, and invalidated by the precision of preparation he had never anticipated. I listened quietly as the judge summarized the findings, noting my strategic foresight in establishing separate accounts, careful record keeping, and an unassailable evidence of his misconduct. Each word was a public acknowledgement of every insult, betrayal, and humiliation I had endured. The courtroom seemed to lean forward, as if the very walls themselves were listening, bearing witness to the transformation of a woman underestimated and mocked for decades. When the final verdict was delivered, the outcome was total and irreversible. The prenuptial agreement was enforced in full. Gregory walked away with almost nothing: personal belongings, remnants of a failing business, and the bitter taste of public defeat. I retained the house, financial independence, and a freedom that was more valuable than anything he had tried to control. For the first time, the narrative of my life was mine to command, entirely unshackled from his interference. Outside the courthouse, reporters pressed for statements, but I remained composed. Amelia joined me, glowing in the pride and security only trust in her mother could provide. She did not need to speak. Her smile said everything. I had not only protected our lives, but also modeled strength, resilience, and independence, lessons that would remain with her far longer than any money or property ever could. The consultancy I had quietly developed flourished. Word-of-mouth referrals led to contracts, speaking engagements, and partnerships that expanded the impact of my work. Women from all walks of life sought guidance, inspired not only by the strategies I shared, but the personal story that lent them undeniable credibility. What had begun as a response to betrayal had evolved into a purpose-driven mission that transformed lives while solidifying my own independence and power. Gregory faded into the background, a cautionary tale of arrogance and underestimation. Attempts to intimidate or manipulate were ignored or countered with calm authority. Every misstep he made reinforced the lessons of preparation and foresight. His failures were public, his reputation irreparably diminished. The humiliation he had inflicted on me had reversed entirely. The very tactics he had used to assert control became the instruments of his own downfall. Even as life settled into this new rhythm, I remained vigilant. Success demanded attention, awareness, and continued effort. I had learned that empowerment is not static. It is a continuous process, requiring strategic action and unwavering self-belief. Each client, each project, each calculated decision reinforced the autonomy I had fought to reclaim. The future, once uncertain and threatened, was now expansive, illuminated by the hard-won lessons of betrayal, endurance, and calculated triumph. The final chapter saw my consultancy thrive, Amelia excelling in college, and a sense of calm authority settling over our home. I walked through rooms that had once been sites of tension, now transformed into spaces of opportunity, reflection, and growth. The woman who had been underestimated, mocked, and challenged was gone. In her place stood someone unbreakable, deliberate, and fulfilled. The victory was not just legal or financial, it was personal, psychological, and eternal. And in the quiet moments, as I reviewed contracts, spoke to clients, or simply watched Amelia succeed, I understood the most profound truth. Betrayal had not ended my life, it had redirected it. Humiliation had not destroyed me, it had forged me. The power Gregory thought he controlled was always mine to claim, and now I wielded it with precision, purpose, and undeniable strength. The final chapter was not just about victory, it was about rebirth, proving that even the deepest wounds could lead to transformation, and that what began as betrayal can, with patience, courage, and strategic action, become the foundation of a life reclaimed in full.